This is the Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond podcast. History with a twist. And now your host, Rebecca Larson.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Rebecca Larson, and well, look who's back again. It's my good friend Sharon Bennett Connolly. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me back.
I feel
Feels
like
I've never been away.
I know. I feel like I should say welcome home.
And we're starting as we mean to go on, already laughing our heads off.
every time we're together, we end up just laughing through the whole show. And by the end, our face hurts and our bellies hurt from it. It's a good exercise, actually.
It is.
I'm kind of excited about today's topic. And you actually recommended this one. And it's way outside my comfort zone. There's going to be a lot of mispronouncing names, I think, at least on my part. Hopefully Sharon might have better luck with it than I do, but we got a lot of names that are not common today. Wouldn't that be right?
Yes, yes.
So to start, we're talking today about, here we go, we're going to get started. We're going to talk about Gytha and Gunhild, or some variation of those names. And before we get into the questions, I just want to pose a question to everyone to kind of think about as we go. So after 1066, Harold Godwinson's daughters lost everything overnight. Status, security, even their country. So why does one end up as a queen of Kiev and the other as a scandalous runaway nun in Norman England? I love this story about them. I'm so excited. Okay, so let's start with their parents because their father is famous. I think even Americans who study English history know the name Harold Godwinson, but their mother is a bit of a mystery, isn't she?
Yes, as with a lot of medieval women, actually, very little is known about her beyond the basics. And it's the bane of my life, No chronicler decided to write, we'll say who his wife is, but no one needs to know more than that. It's like, seriously, come on, give us something. So, yes, you've got Harold Godwinson, who becomes King of England at the beginning of 1066 and doesn't even manage to survive the year. He's killed at the Battle of Hastings on 14th October 1066. I think 1066 is probably the most familiar date in history. If even for you Americans, you'll have heard 1066.
Oh, yeah.
Most people can't remember it was October 1066. There was the Battle of Hastings. They just know 1066 Battle of Hastings. So yes, Harold had been Earl of Wessex. His father was Godwin, Earl of Wessex, and his mother was Gytha, who was, let me see if I can get this right, Canute's sister, King Canute, the one who didn't try to push back the sea. His sister was married to Gytha's brother. So,
if you're watching, you can see me trying to think about this in my head.
So they were technically, I suppose, loosely in-laws. Okay. Gytha was sister-in-law to Canute's sister.
It's just getting more complicated. They're related through marriage. Let's just say that.
They're related through marriage. So they were high in there, and of course Canute was the king of Norway, Denmark, and England. So they were very much, although Godwin was English, they were very much a Scandinavian family, and you see that in the names of their children as well. Their eldest son was called Sweyn. Then there was Harold, Tostig, and Girth, and Livwin, I think, or Liv. They were plenty. All the names were Scandinavian. So, and then the girl, the they had daughters as well, which were Gytha. There's a few Gythas in the family, actually,
Oh.
which doesn't help when you're trying to discern who's who. So, but Harold was the second oldest. His sister Edith was married to Edward the Confessor. So they were the greatest non-royal noble family in England in the early 11th century. You know, they had all of Harold's brothers were earls, and they had a great deal of influence, which Edward the Confessor didn't particularly like, and he did try to curb their influence by kicking them out of the country in about 1050. Unfortunately, they came back stronger and more influential than ever.
Yeah.
And it's so much so that in the end, Harold is actually named King of England after Edward the Confessor's death in 1066, even though Edward the Confessor had a nephew, Edgar, who could have possibly been king, but he was just a teenager. And William of Normandy was already threatening England, so they needed an adult king. Harold had spent, by that point, about 20 years with his technically wife. She's always referred to as a Danish wife, or a wife in the Danish way, in that they had a hand fasting rather than a church wedding. Which means, I mean, some moralist historians in the past called her a concubine, you know, referred to her as Harold's concubine. I don't think she was. She wasn't a mistress. She was his wife, and he treated her like a wife, but in the Danish fashion, in that they didn't have a church wedding, so the marriage could be annulled a lot easier than if they had had a church wedding. And that's what happened in 1066. Harold was now king. Edith wasn't a suitable queen, so he set her aside and married another woman, Edith of Mercia, whose two brothers he needed to support his kingship. So, but he and Edith Swanneck, his first wife, had been together for decades. You know, they had, I'm trying to remember exactly how many children they had, at least 6. At least 4 boys and 2 girls, and possibly 5 boys. And they'd been together at least since the late 1040s. Edith is usually referred to as Edith Swan Neck, suggesting that she had a beautiful long neck. And nowhere does it say that she was an ugly woman. She must have been a beauty. She's always described as something like that. And she and Harold seemed to have been very close, had a loving relationship. And he raised, there was no question over the legitimacy of the children. He raised them as legitimate and as his heirs. They probably had, Edith seems to have been a very rich woman. She had a lot of land in East Anglia and possibly close to Harold's own domains in East Anglia. He was, the first earldom he was given was the earldom of East Anglia. And then once his father died, he became Earl of Wessex, and East Anglia was handed to Alfgar, I think it was, the son of Lady Godiva. So they chopped and changed earldoms every now and then. They weren't as, nowadays we have earldoms of specific areas, specific titles. In those days, Edward the Confessor, if he wanted to reward one of his nobles, he would create an earldom of certain lands and give it to him. So they were a bit choppy and changey.
Can you clarify too? Because I think there was some confusion maybe through the chronicles and stuff on her name, that there were 2 different options. There was Edith, and then there was, I'm trying to remember, was it an Egafu or something along those lines?
The problem is we can't definitively identify her as a specific person, because the names are difficult, translations. She was probably translated to Edith at some point after the Norman conquest,
Okay.
but it's likely she's Edgifu the Fair in
Yeah.
Anglo-Saxon. So yeah, it's just it was one of the difficulties I had when I was writing about her in Silk and the Sword, the Women of the Norman Conquest. It was trying to find her, identify her in the actual records, and luckily we know some of the lands that she had, and she does come up more often than not as Edgifu.
Okay.
But the problem is there's so many names that are very similar in Anglo-Saxon: Edgith, Edith, Edgifu, Edgiver.
Yeah.
It's like, oh please, just But there you go. If
Yeah.
history was easy, everybody would be doing
That
it.
this is so true. So, you hinted at the fact that before or as he became king, as Harold became king, he tossed her aside and married somebody else.
Mm,
It just makes me feel so sad for her and her
it
children, obviously.
Yeah, it does me too. And it is actually the absolutely magnificently inaccurate King and Conqueror that was on television last year did actually show, you know, the old wife and the new wife. And they
Oh.
actually got on a lot better in the TV show than I think they would have done in real
Oh,
life.
I didn't even make it past the first episode of that. I watched the first episode and I was like, nope, can't do it.
Well done. I actually forced myself through it. I wish I hadn't, but I forced myself through it, and was screaming at the telly all the time. It's like, oh God, there were just so many inaccuracies. But what I did like about it was they actually. I had a sneaking suspicion that the bloke who wrote it, the person who wrote it, had actually read my book, Silk and
Oh.
the Sword, because they put the women into the story. And most of the time, when you see medieval adaptations, the women are on the sidelines or on the
Mhm.
peripherals. And it looked like they'd actually thought seriously about how to include the women. And I thought maybe they did, maybe they'd read my
Oh.
book. And I'm going to take the credit for it,
Yeah, as you should. I do. I kind of I want to talk about before Hastings and the lives of Gytha and Gunhild and what they would have looked like before Hastings. And then, of course, as we talk, we'll get to what it looked like after Hastings.
Mm. Well, they were probably born in the mid 1050s.
Okay.
So, as with most girls, we don't have an actual date of birth, unfortunately. I think Gytha was the elder and then Gunhild was the younger. So Gunhild was anywhere between, 10 and 2 when Battle of Hastings happened. We can't say
Oh.
for definite how old she was. So yeah, they would have been little girls, maybe Gytha was about 16, 7, 14, 15, 16, something like that, and Gunhild a little younger. But like I say, they could have been a lot younger. We just it's really hard to say what they were doing exactly in 1066 because we don't know how old they were.
Yeah, that's
Um,
tough.
so they were probably raised in their mother's household. There's this whole idea that girls weren't educated. They would have been educated for what they needed, which wouldn't necessarily mean they learned to write, but they may have learned to read because they were noble women and high nobility as well. So they would have been educated to run a household, a noble household, to some extent for diplomacy as well, to be able to discuss things with people of similar rank, to be able to host guests and hold discussions with guests and be welcoming to them, maybe languages as well, especially seeing as England was so close to France and there was a lot of French and Norman influence at Edward the Confessor's court. and also Latin so that they could follow the offices of the day in the church. Now, one thing we don't know, but it is entirely possible, and we know Gunhild was in the convent at Wilton after the Norman conquest. It may be that Gunhild and Gytha were both there for some time for their education. Wilton was the place to send royal children to be educated. St. Margaret, Queen Margaret of Scots, was educated at Wilton, as was her sister Christina, for some time. And Edith of Wessex, the Queen of Edward the Confessor, was the patron of Wilton. And she sent the children that she fostered to Wilton to be educated. So it's likely that her nieces were sent there for some time, for some of the time, to be educated, if they were old enough by 1066 to be away from home.
Yeah.
But like I said, the problem is we don't exactly know how old they were.
Yeah, that does complicate things a little bit, doesn't it?
It's amazing how much it complicates things, because you're like, well, if she was only 4, then she'd have still been at home. But if she was 10, she might have been, at the convent. So there's difficulties with that. And we don't know the age difference between the girls. So it is confusing.
There's a lot of speculation that has to happen when we look at this history. All right. Well, let's fast forward a little bit then. And do we have any sense of maybe what happened to them immediately after the Battle of Hastings? Were they together, separated, protected?
That's the funny thing. They appear to have been separated or were already separated. Gytha was the oldest, and she was with her grandmother, Gytha of Wessex, Harold's mother. And after the Battle of Hastings, Gytha, according to the monks at Waltham Abbey, Gytha was at the Battle of Hastings with Edith Swanneck. They supposedly walked round the battlefield after the battle had ended to find Harold, and it was Edith who identified his body by certain marks.
Oh my God.
Which shows you how damaged his face must have been for her to have to find his body with marks. And Gytha, Harold's mother, is said to have offered William the Conqueror Harold's weight in gold to be able to take him away to bury him. And the Conqueror refused. I mean, we don't even know. This is the problem with 1066. We don't even know where Harold's buried. According to Norman chroniclers, he was buried on a cliff overlooking the beach, or in an unmarked grave with the soldiers that had died in the battle, and that he was blamed by the Normans for their deaths. Or Waltham Abbey, the monks at Waltham Abbey took his body back to Waltham, and he's buried there. And they have got a marker stone actually at Waltham to say that this was where he was buried. But whether or not they did that so that it would become a pilgrimage site for English people after the Norman conquest, there's just propaganda is a great thing, and we think we invented it. Oh no.
Well, it would make sense then for William the Conqueror to say, no, you can't take his body and bury it, because that's probably what was expected.
Yeah, you're not making him into a hero. He's the bad guy.
Yeah.
So, as far as the Normans are concerned. So, but Gunhild appears to have stayed in the nunnery at Wilton, which suggests to me that she was there already getting her education, and she stayed there after the Norman conquest, or she went there after the Norman conquest to seek shelter, because the Archbishop of Canterbury, Lanfranc, at the time actually issued instructions that Saxon women could seek shelter in a convent and would therefore be unmolested by the Normans. You are not raiding convents. If they're in there, they're safe, they're protected. And they were allowed to stay there for a number of years before the Archbishop decided that it was actually probably safe for them to come out, and they no longer had the total protection of the church. So Gunhild was in the convent at Wilton. Gytha was with her grandmother, also Gytha, and I think her aunt as well, who was also, guess what, called Gytha.
Stay with us, people.
So now Harold's mum, Gytha, like I say, she was at Hastings. She is a really, really interesting character because she isn't one of these wilting violet type women who just lets the world organize her life for her. She takes charge. And after the Norman conquest, she actually is in the southwest of England, encouraging her grandsons to raise rebellion. Harold's sons flee to Ireland at first, but then raise a fleet, come back, and raid England. And Gytha actually is responsible for Exeter resisting William the Conqueror. And it's only after Exeter falls that she decides that England is probably not the safest place for her. So she goes to her nephew on the continent in Denmark, Sweyn Estrithson, who is King Canute's nephew, because his mother, Estrith, was King Canute's sister.
Okay.
Remember that thing at the beginning?
Yeah, sure. Yep, I remember.
So, I mean, King Sweyn is, you can tell that his father's side of the family, the Godwinson side of the family, is not as significant because King Sweyn actually calls himself Sweyn Estrith's son. So he names himself Estrith's son, after his mum rather than his dad. So his mum is the significant person rather than the other side of the family, which is Gytha's brother. But he doesn't turn them away. He welcomes Harold's sons, mum and daughter. And Harold's sister, that other Gytha, she joins a convent in Belgium. So Gytha's there now with her granddaughter, Gytha, and at least two of Harold's sons, who then go off to Norway and pursue a career of soldiering and fight, and as young men do, just going off on adventure. So the two Gythas settle in Denmark, and it is actually King Sweyn Estrithson who probably arranged Gytha's marriage with Vladimir. You saw the pause, didn't you? Vladimir Monomark or something like that. I am so sorry to anyone who's listening who is actually from Ukraine and knows how to pronounce it. But he was the nephew of the reigning Grand Prince of Kiev at the time. And his father was a younger brother of the Grand Prince. And he wasn't necessarily expected to be Grand Prince of Kiev. And he didn't actually get the job, ascend to the title, until after Gytha's death. But he was a very, really influential Prince of Kiev. And his marriage with Gytha was arranged by King Sweyn of Denmark. Now, it sounds like she's gone a long way away.
Yeah.
But when you look at Kievan Rus at that time was basically centered around Ukraine. He was a really close ally to the Scandinavian kingdoms. Harold Hardrada had married Elisiv of Kiev, who was Vladimir's sister, possibly, part of the family anyway. Anna of Kiev was the wife of Henry I of France. It was a pretty, for a principality so far away from the rest of Europe, it was a pretty influential principality, and it was they were very cultured. Anna of Kiev, who married Henry I of France, actually signed her marriage certificate with her name, whereas her husband Henry just signed with an X.
Oh.
So they encouraged education. They had it was culturally, it was very advanced society. So I think Gytha would have settled in quite well there. And she and Vladimir seem to have had a really good marriage. They had plenty, they had a number of children, including a young man named, oh, here we go again, Mstislav the Great.
I was wondering how you're going to pronounce that one because I looked at it. I was like, no, I can't even attempt it.
I don't know. I haven't a clue. When I don't know, I go with phonetically, which has caught me out a few times, but generally I'm all right with.
I think I am curious, and I know you were kind of in the middle of that, but I am kind of curious about if there's any evidence of any influence that Gytha had during her time there. Is there anything to kind of show her influence?
She had her influence. I mean, like I say, with women, you're never sure because they aren't always written about. But there is a suggestion that she was her son really Mstislav really respected her. The Russian Primary Chronicle, which is the main source for that time in Kiev, is confused as to when she died, unfortunately, because there seemed to be some. Vladimir lost a wife in 1107 and then another wife later on, and it's like trying to work out when. Well, she seems to have her piety is the one thing that I noticed in the records that she's noted for. She actually founded a church after her son. Here we go again.
Let's just call him M.
Yeah. He was mauled by a bear and nearly died, and she prayed for his recovery and founded a church as a result, because he did recover, thankfully. And I'm trying to find the name. Sorry, I'm just looking through my notes to try to find the name of the church. Oh, yes, St. Pantaleon.
Yes, yeah. And she had converted religions, had she not?
Yes, the Kievan Rus had been Orthodox since I think it was the 1030s.
Okay.
So she would have had to convert to Orthodox. But other than, there wasn't a major difference between Orthodox and Catholic then. So I don't think she would have seen it as a difficulty, especially having been raised in a Danish family anyway.
Okay.
But she is, I mean, there's one story that when her son was mauled by this bear and nearly died, she prayed for his survival, but she also promised to go on pilgrimage.
Yes.
And she went on pilgrimage to Jerusalem. We don't exactly know when, but it seems, I mean, it makes sense that she actually either joined the First Crusade or went to Jerusalem once the First Crusade had happened. Because the First Crusade started about 1096 to 1099. And so she went to the Holy Land on pilgrimage, probably with just a small number of people with her. But it's just like this woman, she's got a family to look after. She's got a husband she's supposed to be at the side of. But her son, who she seems to have been particularly close to, this Mstislav, had nearly died. She'd promised to go on pilgrimage, so she did it. And then she built a church to St. Pantaleon as well. And it's, so we've got this surviving evidence of her, this church to St. Pantaleon. And we do have the church where she's buried hopefully is still standing in Kiev. And thankfully, a friend of mine, another author, Carol McGrath, She wrote a novel about Gytha. So when I was writing the book, I just emailed her. I said, have you got some photos of St. Sophia in Kiev where she's buried that I could use in the book, please, Carol? And she said, yes. So there's actually photos in the book of the inside of the cathedral in Kiev where she's buried. And it's like, this English princess so far away from home.
Yes, that's the part that gets me. So I'm curious if you see Gita's story as a success story, or do you see it more as a glamorous version of exile?
Well, it's a rags to riches story, really, isn't it? Because she was born as the daughter of a nobleman, of Harold, Earl of Wessex, and his wife, some wife with a question mark, Edith. So, and then in January 1066, she suddenly becomes a princess. Her dad's king, so she's a princess.
Yeah.
And then in October, her dad's dead and vilified as the one who brought about the ruin of England by the conquerors. And so she's suddenly a nobody again.
Yeah.
And then she goes over to Denmark, and her cousin sees the opportunity to make further links with Kiev, and say, oh, I've got a cousin here who, she doesn't have any land with her anymore, but she's an English princess, and, and arranges her marriage. So she's back to riches. I think it's a great story of survival and adaptation, because she just seemed to have made a life for herself in Kiev. She and her husband Vladimir must have got on, because they had a large number of children. So it's not like, and you do see that when love isn't part of any story in medieval England. No royals aren't supposed to marry for love. So you can't look at them and say, oh, they were madly in love. That's just a 21st century view of them. But if they had a lot of children, then you can say they must have got on together. They weren't trying to stay apart. You do look with other royals where, they have 2 or 3 children over the space of 10 years. And it's like, oh, didn't get on then.
Yeah, exactly. Or either that, or the man was away fighting in too many wars.
Well, yes, that's the case as well. So it's like, and the other thing is sometimes you don't know how many children they lost.
True.
Miscarriages and deaths in early life, in infancy, were very common, and they're not always recorded.
Yeah.
So you can't say for definite, but when you can see that they have had a lot of children, that they've spent time together, her husband left memorials to her, and that she's mentioned in the chronicles, and that you can I think there's a certain level of assumption you can make that it was a successful marriage.
Yeah.
Even if love wasn't involved, it was a successful marriage.
True. That's a good point. Okay, so now I want to shift to Gunhild, which this story is unbelievable to me. I don't even know where to begin, because you had mentioned at the beginning that she was in a nunnery or a convent, whatever you want to call them. And that maybe that's where she was educated, but I don't even know where to begin. Why don't you just tell us what you find interesting about her? Because this story is just wild to me.
Well, like I say, again, we can't say for definite with certain things. We know she was in the convent at Wilton. Whether she was there to hide or for protection from the Normans, or to profess herself as a nun, there is a serious question mark over. Because later in life, after she's run away with her chap, she's actually sent a letter by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Anselm, saying, you need to return to the nunnery. You're a nun, come back to the nunnery. And,
spoiler alert, she runs away with the chap.
Yeah, So she's in this convent at Wilton, possibly for her education at first, and then maybe she returns to the convent, or she's stayed there during the Norman conquest. And there's a little bit of an overlap between Gunhild and Edith of Scotland, who changes her name to Matilda of Scotland when she marries Harold Henry I. Because there's a chap named Alan the Red, who is Lord of Richmond and a son of the Count of Brittany. And he tries to marry Edith Matilda of Scotland, but he's refused he makes an offer, and William II, the King of England, refuses. And Audric Vitalis makes this big speech about her being destined for greater things. And of course, she then marries Henry I of England. And she is a Scottish princess. So I think Alan was reaching above himself because he was only a younger son of a count and she's a Scottish princess.
Right.
But he then decides that he's going to turn his attentions to Gunhild. Now, the idea, he and Gunhild run away from the convent together, or he kidnaps her, which is also a possibility. But it seems that there is justification on his part and common sense in his choice of Gunhild, because apparently he's got a lot of Edith Swan-Neck's lands.
Oh.
Now, we don't know what happened to Edith Swan-Neck after the Battle of Hastings in 1066. There's no record of what happened to her at all. She may have gone into a convent as well.
Okay.
But I never managed to find out what exactly happened to her. She just disappears. But her lands are still there. And Alan had been at Hastings fighting with on William the Conqueror's side. So he was given Edith's lands as reward for his contribution. So I was going to say marrying Gunhild, but I think technically the term is shacking up with Gunhild. There's no indication that they married. Maybe they did a Danish handfasting, the same as her mother had done. But he was living with Gunhild, and it might have been that he kidnapped her or asked her to come with him to give him more legitimacy on her mother's lands.
Yeah.
And to use her sort of as to be able to say to her mother's people, look, her daughter's with me, so you should listen to me, and I am legitimately your lord because I'm married in inverted commas to your former lady's daughter.
Yeah, it's kind of like Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, right? It's like this gives my reign legitimacy now that I'm married. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So there's that, but then Alan the Red dies, and like I say, Archbishop Anselm writes to her and says, you need to come back to the convent, you're a nun. And instead of that, she shacks up with, great word again, Alan the Black, who just happens to be Alan the Red's brother.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks, or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Tap the banner to learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Okay, so the black and the red. First of all, do we have any idea why they were called that?
I think because their dad had decided to name two boys Alan, for one thing, they thought they'd better distinguish. So I'm assuming that Alan the Red had red hair or a ruddy complexion, and Alan the Black had dark hair.
Oh my gosh, how original. Huh?
I don't know how they'd have differentiated if they both had the same colour hair. It might have been short and tall or whatever.
Oh my gosh, why not just name them different names?
Too much sense.
Yeah, exactly.
After the number of Gythas we've just been talking about.
Now we got, okay. So now she's shacking up with Alan the Black, the brother to her previous love interest.
Yeah. Again, probably to justify, to give legitimacy to Alan the Black for the lands that were her mother's. So yeah, and she did have at least one child, a lady named Matilda, who married Walter Danecourt, who was another Norman who had lands in Lincolnshire. And they had a son named William, who was fostered at the court of William II. Young children in those days, when they were 7 years old, boys were fostered, noble boys were fostered out to start their training as pages, then squires, then knights. And young William was William Rufus's court. And some kind of accident happened to him and he died. And he's buried in Lincoln Cathedral.
Oh, wow.
Just down the road from me. And we've still got, they don't know where his burial is anymore, but they've actually got the plaque marker from his burial that says that he was Matilda and Walter Danecourt's son. And he was a relative, a distant relative of Remigius, who was the first Bishop of Lincoln and who did the foundations for the current Lincoln Cathedral.
Wow. Wow. Now that you're saying that too, I was like, which of the sisters left a greater legacy?
Well, I mean, I think I would have to say Gytha, because her blood now is in the English royal family. Her great granddaughter was Philippa of Hainault, the wife of Edward III.
Okay. Wow. That's a really cool connection.
Yeah. But then again, Gunhild's, the Danecourts are still in Lincolnshire. So, and you come across them every now and then through the centuries, the 12th, 13th centuries, there's still Danecourts in positions of influence in Lincolnshire and at the royal courts. So I suppose they both left a legacy behind them. And in a way, that's really unusual for two girls whose time as a princess was really short, 10 months as the daughters of the King of England.
Right.
But they found very different futures.
Yeah.
You'd have to hope they both got something of what they wanted in life.
Yeah, considering both of them were, I don't know, teetering on illegitimacy, right? We don't even know. So they go from maybe being illegitimate daughters to being princesses, daughters of the king. I find that interesting because it's so different than later history, right? Because they would have been dismissed more so as these illegitimate children. Would they have been offered great marriages? What would it have looked like by comparison?
Well, the thing is, I mean, the technicalities of marriage in the 11th century until the Norman conquest were not as strict, because Harold had two wives at the same time, basically, Edith Longneck and Edith of Mercia. Swanneck, sorry, not Longneck. And Edith of Mercia. Canute had been handfasted with Elfgifa of Northampton, I think it was, before marrying Emma of Normandy.
Yeah.
Harold Hardrada, I mentioned he was married to Elisive of Kiev. He then married another woman in Denmark, even though he was still married to Elisive. She'd only given him daughters, so he married this other woman so he could have sons. So it was hard to find. I think Edward the Confessor was unusual in that he had one wife, in the first half of the 11th century. Having two seemed to be the done thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But that wasn't as once the Norman conquest happened, marriage became more regulated and legitimacy. Funnily enough, when you think of William the Conqueror being actually illegitimate himself, the legitimacy regarding inheritance was more strict, and especially for the crown. So you had to be, because otherwise Henry I would have, if he could have put his eldest son, Robert of Gloucester, on the throne, who was illegitimate but was certainly capable of the job, ahead of his daughter Empress Matilda, we would never have had the anarchy. But because Robert of Gloucester was illegitimate, it was a no-go.
Right.
So legitimacy 100 years later was the really important thing. But before the Norman conquest, the rules were a little bit looser.
It's so interesting. And when you were talking about Gytha going into exile with her grandmother, it made me wonder, and I've been thinking about this since you said it, is it possible that Edith Swanneck died sometime around then, and that's why she left with her grandmother and not her mother?
I think it's possible. It's either she or she went into a convent, I think.
Sure.
But there is just no mention. So it is, I don't know. She either died or she joined a convent and became a nun, which may also be, because we do know Edith of Mercia, Harold's other wife, she, after the Battle of Hastings, her brothers took her to Chester, where she is thought to have given birth to at least one son named Harold. Some people think twins with another boy called Ulf, but we don't know. But definitely one son named Harold. And then she went to Norway to get away from William the Conqueror.
Oh, interesting.
And there are stories of this Harold still being alive 20 or 30 years later. So we know, and there is a possibility that Edith joined a convent in France, which has a charter that says that the refectory was built with money given by a Queen of England, but it doesn't name the Queen of England. So it's possible it's Edith. It's also possible that the entire charter is a fake or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but but there's nothing about Edith Swanneck, unless of course she's the Queen of England, and they just didn't realise that she wasn't Queen of England because she was the wife of King Harold. So it's so many possibilities.
That's interesting.
It's just really annoying that we don't know.
Yeah, that's the difficult part of researching that time in history, is you just don't have the documentation that you do in later centuries.
No.
So I have to get... Oh, go ahead.
We're lucky that we have Doomsday, the 1086 Doomsday book, because that does record at least who owned land before 1066 and who was owning it, who owned it in 1086. So we know which parts of the land Edith owned, because we have, Alan the Red owned it in 1086, but Edith owned it in 1066. But it's just so annoying that she just drops off the face of the earth in 1066. Yeah. She finds Harold's body and that's it. So what happened? It's like it's like somebody wrote this book and there's one thread that they forgot to finish.
Yeah, exactly. Like, whoa, you're reading the book and you're like, whoa, wait, what happened next?
Yeah, it's so annoying.
Well, speaking of what happened next, we have to get back to Gunhild, because we have to figure out what happened to her. Did she go back to the nunnery?
No, she didn't. I don't believe she did anyway. She's another one who, at the end of it, is like, so what happened? We don't know.
Oh, no. But she lived an interesting life.
Yeah, and she is, I mean, we do have, like I say, Anselm, the Archbishop of Canterbury, wrote to her. And she actually... we have a reply from her, which is nice, because it's you don't often see women's voices. So he's writing to her saying, you need to return to the habit and vowed life which you rejected. And she replies, from this I was able to learn that you would not... she replies to Anselm. We don't have the reply, but from it, Anselm says, from this I Anselm, was able to learn that you would not deny your holy intention the habit of which you were then already wearing, but I hope that you would act according to God's will as you had promised. So she's said to Anselm, look, maybe I should return to the convent. I'll think about it. And he's trying to pressure her into doing it. And Anselm seems to think that she ran away because she wasn't made abbess.
Oh, right. Yes.
Which suggests that she had taken the veil, but I don't know. She certainly didn't return to after Alan the Red died in 1089. She didn't return to the convent, and then by 1093 she's with Alan's brother Alan the Black. And Archbishop Anselm's writing to her again, look, you ran away with one man, now you're with another man. You really need to return to convents.
It does seem rather dramatic that if it was because she wasn't made abbess, that she would then run off and shack up with these other men. That seems like a pretty dramatic twist to the story.
It does. But the thing is, Alan the Black dies in 1098. And what happened to Gunhild after that? We don't know. And we don't know when she died or where she died. And it's just like, that's another thread. Whoever wrote this book really needs a good editor.
Yeah. So basically, then once they lose their husband or that strong male figure in their life, that's when we kind of lose track of them.
Yeah, exactly. Because the husbands are the ones who are written about rather than the women.
Yeah.
So we know she was with Alan the Red. We know then she was with Alan the Black, that she had at least one child. But after that, I think given the way she was very reluctant to return to the convent after Alan the Red's death, even though the Archbishop of Canterbury is telling her to do it, I doubt really that she returned to a convent at any time. She's obviously reluctant. But her mother was rich, had a lot of lands, and it may be that she was given some of these lands to live on after Alan the Black died. Her daughter didn't inherit those lands. They went to the brother of the two Allans. Mm. And he was called Stephen.
Oh, wow, they got original there.
So he inherited their lands. So perhaps he gave Gunhild a little corner of it in a cottage to live in for the rest of her life. Or she went to live with her daughter, who was married to Walter Danecourt. So he wasn't poor, that's for sure. So, it's just, it's infuriating. Because it's like we all want, we're so used to endings.
Yeah.
It's like you just don't get them with medieval women.
No, you don't. But I love the story of these two women. I mean, they couldn't be more different with how their lives turned out. The runaway nun story to me is classic. I love that it's true. She actually did this.
Yeah.
If there is one thing that you want to leave with the listeners about these two women, what is it that you would like that lasting impression to be?
That they lived, that they shouldn't be forgotten. Because, I started my book, Princesses of the Early Middle Ages, originally at the Daughters of William the Conqueror. And then when I was told I needed to split the book up because it was too long, and I thought, I've actually got another few thousand words I can play with here. I can put Harold's daughters in it because they're so often overlooked.
Yeah.
They're not part of the pre-1066 story very much, and they're not part of the post-1066 story. But then again, their stories they're what could happen to girls whose father attained the highest accolades, but then lost it all in one battle.
Yeah.
It's like, it's interesting to see that they did survive and to some extent thrive and to other extent, they weren't exactly the traditional version of princesses, in that, one married into Kiev and Rus, as far away as from England as you could possibly get in those days.
Yeah.
And the other one ran away from a convent.
I know. I just
and
love
picked
this.
her spouses based on their name. Oh, you're Alan. I'll stay with you then.
Right, and she kept it in the family. So this was a great story. I'm glad that you wanted to share this story with me and the listeners. I learned a lot from it. I'm never going to remember all of these names, but that's what books are for. So
that's what books are for.
Let's talk again about your newest book that will be coming out, and when it will be coming out, and how people can find it or pre-order.
It's Princesses of the Early Middle Ages, Royal Daughters of the Conquest. It's out in the UK on the 30th of March. So 5 days.
Yes, soon.
And in the US on the 30th of May. So 31, 30. So 66 days.
Wow, this is
the US release. And and then there's the follow-up, the second part of the book, the sequel, Princesses of the Later Middle Ages, is out in August.
wonderful. And I'm going to include links in the show notes to that. Also to your podcast. I always want to give you the opportunity to plug your podcast.
Oh, yeah, A Slice of Medieval. And there's a new episode out today in which I talk about my new book, Princesses of the Early Middle Ages.
What? I'm so surprised.
With my co-host, Derek Burks. So, and then there's my website, historyoftheinterestingbits.com.
Yes. So, and there's lots of information on there. You have been writing on there for a really long time, haven't you?
I have, since I got it as a Christmas present for Christmas 2014.
Oh,
so it's 11 years old now.
I was just going to say, I started mine in 2015, so I didn't realize it was that close.
Well, the first post went out 8th of January 2015. So, yeah.
I love that. Well, you have done so great for yourself. You've written so many books. Again, I'm going to put all the links in the show notes so people can find your work. They can find your podcast, your website, because, I like you. So I want to make sure other people get to find you and read what you've done. So Sharon, thank you so much for joining me again today.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you never miss a new release. And if you loved it, leave a quick review. It helps more history lovers find the show. Want to support the podcast and get bonus content? Head to patreon.com/tutorsdynasty. You can also find the link in the show notes of this episode. Join the conversation with Rebecca on social media at Tudors Dynasty. Until next time.